Hey, yeah, must be out your mind. You think I'm doing just sitting, I'm doing nothing? Oh my God, can't be serious, man. Where the hood, where the hood, where the hood at? Had a in the cut where the wood at.
Hello, do you do a vegetarian bucket? Okay, I'll just have a small popcorn chicken then, please.
We'll do the veggie rice pot.
Yep, Mercedes G-Class, or G-Wagon, or whatever you want to call it. Well, just those two things, really.
Break yourself, fool!
So contrary to popular belief, the G in G-Class doesn't stand for gangster, or ginormous, or genitals. It comes from the German word Geländewagen, meaning cross-country vehicle.
Tight.
In production since way back in 1979, what's amazing about the G-Class is that Mercedes has basically been selling the same car ever since. I mean, yeah, it's been updated many times over, but there's not been a proper new model until now, 4 decades later. It's probably fair to say that for a good couple of decades towards the end, the G-Class was Robert Redford. Still looks striking, but wouldn't necessarily be first pick for the relay team. That said, right towards the end, Mercedes still thought it was a good idea to make a V12 engined AMG version. It was as terrifying as it sounds. Imagine strapping a jetpack to a Segway. Yep, it was baffling, but in an absolutely amazing sort of way. Thankfully, that's still the case. All new it may be, but it still looks identical. So, no matter whether you're staring at it from the outside or sitting up in this chair here, it generates the same sort of brilliantly comical joyfulness. Because it's so cartoonishly proportioned and unnecessarily aggressive. And in this particular case, ridiculously noisy and overpowered. Yep, this is the AMG version, or as my daughter called it, the OMG version. It has a twin-turbo V8 engine with 600 odd horsepower and it costs £140,000. But the mental thing is that you can put those things aside, the price and the power, and this thing is still absolutely stupid. Like, the central locking sounds like a shotgun going off. Same with the doors, doesn't sound like you're closing them as much as whacking a metal barrel with a baseball bat. And the side tailpipes, which not only contribute to an apocalyptic engine sound, but act as a personal smoke machine so that stepping out onto the Lidl car park is more like stepping onto the top of the pop stage. And some people will need a pole vault, just to get into the driving seat. And once you're sat here, the whole outside world feels like the set of a Rick Moranis movie.
I am Vince Clartho, Keymaster of Gozer.
Not that one, the other one.
It shrunk the kids.
Nick, what happened?
It works. Diane, I got something real important to tell you.
Honestly, this thing might as well have a pair of Y-fronts with a cucumber stuffed down the front, sellotape to the grille. And yet, in completely redesigning the G-Class from the ground up, despite the appearance to the contrary, Mercedes has somehow made it one of the most prudent automotive purchases you could possibly make. Stick with this, there is almost nothing that this car cannot do. And it's just so deeply impressive that you almost begin to think about it as good value. Almost. For a start, it's almost entirely hand-built in its own factory in Austria, which is something in itself. Quite near where Arnie grew up, appropriately. And then there's the cabin, which is just... It has Mercedes' giant panoramic twin LCD screen setup, and there is much leather, quilted if you want it to be, and there's ambient lighting all over the shop in many different colours. It is a truly lovely place to be. It's even got a passenger side grab handle for you to hold on to when you're mounting an especially tall curb. On that though, the cabin does feel really luxurious, but there still is deference to it being a proper SUV. It still has really thin pillars and a massive glass house and a really shallow dashboard. So those things, combined with how high you're sat, make visibility really good. It's a funny thing, but it turns out that one of driving's great joys is being able to look down on somebody who's driving a Range Rover. There really is no car quite like this. Every single moment you spend in it is an absolute event. The only way I can really get across what this thing feels like to drive is if you imagine a transit van that's been powered by a rally team and decked out by Louis Vuitton. At the same time though, it's not difficult to drive at all, it's surprisingly easy to move around. Turning circles a bit crap, but it's got these massive indicator houses right on the corners and they make it pretty easy to guide when you're parking and stuff. And generally speaking, it has luxury SUV levels of refinement, which along with the cabin upgrade is the other massive difference between this and the old G-Class. It's still sat on quite an old school ladder frame chassis because it's still a proper off-roader, but it now has more modern suspension and steering, which are both absolutely transformative when it comes to this car's on-road behaviour. There's no getting away from the fact that this is a 4x4. There's a necessary amount of suspension travel and that's really obvious in the way the car sort of rolls around, but the way that a lot of 4x4s shake you around on any given surface is akin to aeroplane turbulence, whereas in here it's generally quite settled. And actually, even when it is throwing you around a little bit more than you'd get in a regular car, it kind of just adds to the charm and the appeal of the whole thing. And I came to understand that when I was sat in the passenger seat, and it seemed to be rolling around there a lot more than it did when I was concentrating on driving it. The steering is massively improved though. Aside from the slight turning circle deficit, it's just lovely and light and it's accurate, and it contributes to the whole feeling of this being a generally very calm and pleasant thing to go about your business in, despite its obvious madness in many ways. On top of that, there's a real sense of refinement in here. Well, I think there is anyway, because I reckon I could be driving past Dorothy's house in The Wizard of Oz, and I'd probably still only be hearing one thing. This thing. It's the engine. It's a deep, burbling symphony. Actually, you know what? You might as well just listen to the bloody thing again. There are three massive buttons right in the middle of the dashboard that allude to this car's capabilities beyond just being a giant phallus on 22-inch rims. See, these three buttons lock the differentials because the G-Class remains one of the most accomplished 4x4s on the planet. And what's especially impressive is that Mercedes has actually improved that stuff over the last car, despite this being significantly more modern on the tarmac. Better ground clearance, low range mode for the 9-speed automatic gearbox, a snappy and smooth gearbox that's yet another very modern and pleasant part of the on-road driving characteristics of this thing as it goes, and generally a range of departure and approach type statistics that will have the average farmer frothing at the dash. And that's why I've come to the conclusion that this truly justifies its immense price tag. So let's assume that you are a consumer with the sort of financial clout that it requires to buy one of these things, and that you're also bothered about the average consumer type stuff. This G-Class was available only as an AMG model at first, but Mercedes has very recently brought out a diesel one too, meaning there's now a great value and highly attainable base model. See? And though this may look like just a slightly bigger and slightly posher Suzuki Jimny, I know, right? It's not really. Nope, this two-pronged pitchfork thrown directly into the ozone layer comes as standard with the sort of equipment list that you would expect from a luxury SUV that costs this much. It's an obvious statement, I know. But that's regardless of which prong you choose. There are no trim levels as such, just a bunch of high-priced options that you'll tick because you can rather than because you need to. Standard stuff, we're talking twin panoramic HD displays, 20-inch alloys, heated seats, adjustable damping with selectable driving modes, and a Burmeister surround sound system that has been designed specifically to play trap music.
Your boyfriend is a dork, make loving.
And the engines look like this, with the AMG powered one giving you Lamborghini-like power with absolutely no recourse to fuel consumption or CO2 emissions whatsoever. Although that's not quite true, it actually has cylinder shutdown, so it'll stop using 4 of the 8 cylinders if you're just going gently on the motorway, which is yet another incongruously modern feature that this car has. And the diesel one is the one you'll buy if you want a half-decent tank range so that you don't have to keep going to the garage. That's the theory anyway. But I say you might as well go the whole hog and get the OMG one. Oh, and finally, practicality. Compared to the old G-Class, it's slightly bigger in every direction, and you can probably guess this for yourself, but just to confirm, it is indeed very spacious inside. Couple of things though. Firstly, the side hinged boot isn't ideal if you're parked nose to tail outside your crib, but assuming you can get full access to it, it's pretty massive, and it obviously has a really high loading deck. And again, some people will find it extremely difficult to get in and out of because the step is so high. Oh, but the tailgate does have this additional cylindrical exterior storage box. It has a wheel in it, but you can easily take that out and use that to put things in too. And if you like, you can use it to mount pictures of your favourite stuff. Beloved animals, weaponry, cosmetic products, all kinds of things. And so this is 100% my favourite SUV ever and one of my favourite cars of all time. Hugely practical, but actually without being too ginormous to park, seriously. Ridiculously over-engined and yet still very easy to drive. Surprisingly refined, yet able to easily conquer the steepest of grassy knolls. And with all that stuff, never anything less than mesmerising to both look at and drive. If you can afford one of these and you haven't got one, shame on you.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Normal service will resume next week. I'll get some boring crossover in. Please hit subscribe, give us a like, and if you do enjoy the videos, watch the rest of them and tell your friends. We could do with being a bit bigger. See you next time. Bye. Hello, do you do a vegan Big Mac, please?
We don't do a vegan Big Mac. We do like veggie burgers, but I don't know if they're classed as being vegan. I'd have to check.
Okay, it's alright. I'll just have a chicken nugget Happy Meal, please.
Okay.